welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Conversation 78, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. And this week, I am joined by Jen Cort. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Well, Jen, thanks very much for taking some time out of your day and being on the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm super thrilled because I know that I had an interview fall through, and then I saw you pop up on my Twitter feed, like, that sounds really cool. I'm going to talk to her. And then here we are. And you were ready to talk even the day that I asked you, which was yesterday. So holy smokes. Thank you.
I know. Well, thank you. You caught me in this fabulous window because as of last Friday, am not traveling for a couple of weeks and all my work is at home. So I have this amazing flexibility, which is unusual for me. And I'm taking advantage to just do things that I really want to do. So I'm excited to be here. And it's interesting to be on this side of the podcast.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I have had the rare opportunity of being on a bunch of different podcasts just in the last couple of weeks. I'm doing my fourth guest appearance tonight.
Wow.
In like 2 weeks.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but it is weird. It's weird because I get on a podcast and I'm not recording, and it always makes me nervous. It's like, what do I do with it? What happens? So yeah, it is an odd sensation to be on the other side. Is this your first time being on someone else's podcast?
No, I've been on Stephen Hurley's show a couple of times.
Yeah.
But not in a while. So, and I mean, it seems so recent. I only launched Third Space in August. Mm-hmm. But since then I've done so many interviews that it feels quite a while ago. Yeah.
You've been going, what is it, once a week?
Every other week, but I record in between. So we have, I think I have about 8 episodes that are just waiting to be put forward.
Oh, that's a nice feeling though.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I fell behind and now I'm just trying to get 2 weeks ahead, and I'm almost there. So you're helping me stay on track. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm happy to help.
Well, you've kind of tipped your hand already. You're not a regular classroom teacher as many of my guests are. So what do you actually do right now in the education world?
So right now, I work with schools around the country to live out their diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice missions. And I also help schools to redevelop and redesign their advisory programs because it's, just something a lot of schools need support with. And I've been doing advisory work for almost 30 years and equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice my whole life. But I started doing this work full time 4 years ago, having left my job as a principal after seeing my first PK class through to graduation.
Oh, wow. That's a neat way to do it.
Yeah, it felt like good timing.
Yeah, so for sure. Just so I can, just for clarification, what's an advisory program? That sounds very broad.
Okay, yes, it is. So most schools, particularly middle and upper schools, have some sort of program that connects kids and adults. So it might be advisory, they might call it homeroom, they might call it life skills, some kind of space that's not as scheduled or programmed. And it can serve as this amazing anchor point for relationships between kids and other kids, as well as kids and adults. But very few people are trained to do it. And so it serves as an anchor point for some kids, but not for all. And so when I work with a school on that, I help them to write their own program in their mission, tradition, and calendar so that they don't need someone like me.
So is it some sort of a flavor of counseling then? Is this how this works?
Yeah, kind of. It's usually like, it's basically the middle and high school version of homeroom.
Okay.
So it's, in homeroom, it's different in lower school, and in the middle schools, I don't know what they have all different names. They have advisory, they have TAP, the teacher and student association. I can't remember the exact words. Or they come in all different names, but they're usually kind of that equivalent of homeroom, and they become kind of a hangout time, which is fantastic, and kids need the downtime, but it's also really precious connectivity time that we could be using in a way that really supports the values of the school.
Right. And you said that you walked through pre-K class all the way through to grade 12, and then you
Yeah.
switched your job. Was that the sole reason that you switched out? Was this this group is done, or was it just kind of a right timed
It was
decision?
right timed. I had started at that school as a counselor in all three divisions, lower, middle, and upper at the same time. And then, had, how it is in schools, we have so many different jobs. And I became the middle school principal. And my students who were seniors came back, and they often would come and visit us and said, can you believe we're graduating? And I had kind of this moment where I felt like, if I don't leave when I still love it, and if I don't do it now, I'm going to be somebody who ends up being in my school for 30 years. And no criticism of those who are in their school for 30 years, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I was in a private school. So I then applied to become a head of school and was offered a position, but life made it so that wasn't going to work. And I thought, I've always had this desire to help schools think about these conversations in a different way. And so if not now, when? And I tried it, and it's been about 4 years, and been doing a lot of work with it in a lot of different schools. It's really exciting.
And your focus is equity, justice, inclusion. Why that?
Well, so my parents were hippies. They raised us on a commune. So
Oh,
I don't really remember a time in my life where social justice was not part of our conversation. So that's just always been the lens through which I view the world. And my degrees are in clinical social work. So that reinforces that, now what do you do about social justice?
mm,
And it's just the way I've always been everything I do comes through that as part of the focus.
mhm.
It was interesting though, when I decided to start doing this full time, or I thought I was going to, I reached out to a lot of my colleagues because I was like, so I'm a white, middle-aged, middle-class, Quaker, heterosexual woman. Like, what do I have
Yeah.
to offer to the conversation? And over again, my mentors who are just amazing diversity and equity practitioners said, we're tired of being the only ones to do this, and we need more people to call people into the room. So that's pretty much how I spend all day, every day. I'm not so much fun at a dinner party. It's like pass the potatoes and have you conveyed a microaggression today. But yeah, it's nice to be able to get to work and have my mission be the focus of my work. And I get to be with kids still, so that makes me really happy.
Right, right. So who are you calling into the room then? You say you're calling people in.
Anybody a lot of my focus seems to be on helping everyone to see their relationship to the conversation. So it used to be we talked about race if we had students of color in the room, and now we know we all need to be talking about race. And or it used to be that if as a white person, if I said I want to talk about race, then I was thought to be racist. And now as a white person, if I say I don't want to talk about race, I might be considered racist. And so my work is to provide the connectivity and between those two. So it's calling anybody into the room who feels that the conversation is separate from them, or they're so intimidated by it that they don't know where to start, and just trying to give everyone those start places for them to identify for themselves where they need to start, and then give them resources to start there.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking mainly about students, or is this mainly about teachers?
All of them, everybody, parents,
Right.
teachers, administrators, students. If you're really going to affect change in a community, then you need to talk with everybody and much more importantly, listen to everybody. So a lot of times the kids are much further along than the adults in the conversation.
Mm.
So it's a matter of helping the adults to hear what the kids are needing to talk about. So it's everyone.
So, all right. So, boy, so many things to think about. What what do the kids want to talk about? I mean, what are the things on their mind right now?
I just did, I always ask kids, what should adults be thinking about? Or I say, I'm going to go work at a school tomorrow. We're talking about sexual orientation. What do you think they should know?
Mhm.
Um, and overall, what I'm hearing from kids is we need you to create, we being the adults, we need you to create space for us to have conversations. The kids will say, we don't need you to have the answers or even to tell us necessarily what you think, but we do need to be able to have the conversations, and we need to see ourselves in the curriculum. We need to have, models in the, posters in the room, and all, like, we need to not feel like we're a visitor in our classroom.
Mhm.
Um, Lots of conversations around race and privilege and gender identity. And I'm in the US, so a
Mhm.
lot of conversations around political beliefs and how I'm not sure how it is in other places, but in the US, it's become very much like if you say you are Republican, then there no dots even connect to that you must also be racist.
Mhm.
And helping kids to navigate those kinds of conversations, which is really about how do you have a difficult conversation with someone and listen to them and not judge them. So those are the things that kids are talking to me a lot about. And then, of course, with all the issues around sexual harassment, what does it mean to be in a relationship where you have equity and where consent is something you can talk about. So a lot of what's comes up in the news is what comes up in the classrooms, and when they feel really stuck is when they can't talk about it around the teachers.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, this echoes a conversation I had with another teacher a couple episodes back about just having difficult conversations. I mean, what do you do to create the opportunities, the space, the setting so that those conversations can happen? Because I think that's a skill that really every teacher should have, regardless of what you're teaching.
Yeah, that's a class I teach, and it's one of those ones that they offered it once, and it's now, I don't know, on its seventh or eighth offering, and it fills up every time.
Mhm.
School teachers are clamoring for that. I think it's really about, well, first we have to take ourselves out of it. I mean, teachers, we need to know where our vulnerabilities are, so we need to know what the boundaries are of these conversations.
Mm.
But a lot of it has to do with having some scripts almost that we use, to even say things like, um, I need you to be available to learn. And so if there's something on your mind that's making it so you're not available to learn, then you could talk about it, you could journal about it, you could draw a picture of it. And you can show those to me if you want to, and we can talk about them if you want to. And if not, I just need you to have a place to put it. Um, I think it's also helpful if teachers have, the ability to kind of quickly say when a kid says something that's really strikes us uncomfortably, or we don't know what to do with it, to just simply look at a child and say, I hear you. I hear that that's a big concern of yours. It's such an important topic. I don't want to rush through it. I need to think about it, and let's come back to this, and then give a time of when you'll come back to it. And in the meantime, you can go find your friends and be like, I can't believe this is, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself or get yourself a nice strong cup of tea.
Yeah.
But being able to tell a child, I hear you, and model, because I care so much, I'm not going to rush into this answer. I mean, that's a good thing to teach them.
Mhm.
I think, and the big thing in navigating challenging conversations is, what kind of listening guidelines and parameters are you putting up for kids? Are they able to listen without reloading, meaning they're just waiting for the person to stop talking, so they can really hear?
Mhm.
And teachers can do that well by showing them, what reloading looks like. It's always the kid whose hand's raised halfway through the sentence, or they
Yeah.
visibly look like they're ready to talk. But even creating space when you're talking about math for, we're going to share something, and then we're just going to quietly think about that for a minute.
Mhm.
That's a skill that translates to these difficult conversations too.
Yeah. Wow, that's very true. I mean, I'm just thinking about, some recent conversations I've been having with a student that's just going through some challenging times. And, sometimes the student will just come in and just say, and just sit there. And I'm like, well, what do you want to talk about? Uh, and like, I just want to be here. I'm like, okay, so this is like super awkward, right? And they'll be like, yeah, this is awkward. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And they'll just sit there and just be awkward for a while, and then wind up, that space is so valuable, right? Just
Yeah.
empty space sometimes is what a student needs. All right, we're going to get back to my conversation with Jen in just a minute, but first I want to tell you about the Well Endowed podcast by the Edmonton Community Foundation. It's hosted by Andrew Paul and Elizabeth Bonkink, and it explores the impact of passionate people who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in. The Edmonton Community Foundation helps people create endowment funds, and the podcast tells the stories of how those endowments intersect with the community. The show comes up monthly, and if you'd like to hear it or you want to read the show notes, you can head over to thewellendowedpodcast.com. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Jen. That space is so valuable, right? Just
Yeah.
empty space sometimes is what a student needs.
It's what we all need. I mean, yeah, it's why I'm so glad that things like mindfulness are coming in, so we can just teach that skill of just being. We, as a society, I think we've moved so quickly to, there's a problem, we must solve it. There's a question, we must answer it. And sometimes the best thing we can do is learn to sit next to a question or a problem.
What, you go into school. So you go into schools, right? And you're sort of working as a consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's a typical day of consulting look like for you then?
Well, it really depends on what I'm there for, because I don't have it would make my life easier, I think, but it'd be so much less interesting if I had here's my program. It's from 9 to 12, and at 10:55, we're going to take a break. I don't really have that. I admire those who do. But my work is really, my focus and goal is to work my way out of every job. So I listen firstly for what a school needs, and then I work through that. Kind of a typical, if I'm there for the day, I'm usually doing some listening sessions. I always want to, if I'm there for a day, I always want to meet with students. And that's kind of a must do for me. Then I'm usually doing some kind of program to help bridge new vocabulary for the adults. And then usually making some recommendations based on what I've heard and what I've seen, and often a debriefing meeting with kind of administrative groups to say, here's what I've heard, not who I've heard it from, but here's what I've heard, and here are some suggestions. Sometimes I go in just to do an assembly, or a faculty meeting just to do that. And I'm fine doing that. I love having the time to do that. But I need to be part of a sequence of speakers if we're talking about diversity, because having somebody who represents all the groups I represent as your diversity speaker alone is not really diversity in itself. So making sure that I'm part of a continuum. And then, because I'm also a social worker and therefore a therapist, in my case anyway, I often do some sort of parent workshop on the things that are different for kids today, that they need to know that they're, different. There are things that kids today, especially middle schoolers and early upper schoolers, face that are different than they were even 10 years ago.
Like what?
So one is athletics has become an entity around which family life orients, and identity is wrapped up in it. So kids are being encouraged to major in a sport as young as 7 or 8. So if that's the case, and I'm Jen and I'm 7 and I'm a soccer player and I play soccer now 3 seasons a year, multiple teams, then what happens when my body can't do it anymore? Or I lose interest, or I go through adolescence and it's harder. So that's a big one. My identity is now wrapped up in it. My parents' identity is wrapped up in it. Another is, of course, devices being in every space where kids are. And in some ways, there are some benefits to that. My students who are gay or lesbian or transgender, or the only students of color in their class, will frequently say that having a device gives them a space to have a peer group. But devices are a real thing, and they do cause some real challenges, and we have kind of we're kind of hypocritical with our rules around it. As educators, we'll frequently say to our kids, our student kids, don't pull your phones out when you're not supposed to, but then they see us walking down the hall checking our phone. Or we say, don't post a picture without your friend's permission, but then they get on their parents' Facebook and they see their whole lives without their permission.
Yeah.
And then the other two are adolescence is happening earlier and lasting longer. So that's important because still most parents aren't talking to kids about it until around 6th grade. And that's really well into the process of adolescence for most kids.
Right.
And then lastly are the conversations around equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. Students who, I've got these for every grade, so I'll just give you a few, but, 8th graders in the US, certainly, and I'm sure other countries, they don't remember a time before they had a Black president. So having a white president now is unusual for them. And that's an interesting way to think about how they're thinking about history.
Yeah.
And 6th graders won't remember a time before transgender was a word that was used in everyday vernacular. So it's just kind of, and they're for every grade. In the US, 5th graders won't remember a time before it was legal to be gay or lesbian and be married in the United States. So, those, when we think about the changing conversation for kids, if I walk into a classroom and I say to kids, what do you know about gender? If I say, is gender just boy and girl? Almost every time they'll be like, no, why are you saying that? But if I ask their parents, is gender, male and female? They'll say, yeah. So we've got to make sure we are the connectivity between the generations. So that's what I talk to parents about, and teachers. Teachers need to know too.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I'm reading a book right now called "But What If We're Wrong," and it's about sort of widely accepted truths and how they actually change, but we tend to accept whatever is the current truth. We think that's the way it's always been and always will be. But they're talking about the shift in our culture and in our language about how we describe gender and sexuality, and it's the one thing that has changed more than anything else in the last 15 years. And I mean, I can certainly attest to that for myself. Like I feel like I'm trying to keep up in a lot of ways, you know. So, but here's the most common, I think, pushback that I can envision in my mind here is this idea that we're taking away their youth and their innocence, because we're talking about some pretty big things right now. Especially when it comes to things like equity, diversity, justice, inclusion. Some of that stuff is bumping up against some pretty big ideas. So, I mean, how do you approach that? Have you ever encountered that kind of naysaying thing?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Always. Well, not always, often. So to me, that really gets into a conversation. So first of all, every conversation with children has to be developmentally appropriate. And where it gets really dicey and I think verges on dangerous is when we are introducing a subject to children and doing it through our biases or our lack of education instead of asking them, I'm always saying to teachers, use what you already do. When they're little, we ask them all the time, what do you know? What do you think you know? And what do you want to know? And so asking them about that in any of these more, perceptively, or potentially challenging conversations, which are really usually more challenging for adults. But the other piece is I think we as a group of adults need to think about how privilege works and that, it used to be if I said I had privilege, then I was also saying I was discriminatory. And now I know that, because I'm a human, I have privilege, and that has nothing to do with whether or not I'm discriminatory.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of the ultimate state of privilege to not have to talk about certain things. So, for example, take race. White parents will ask me, I don't want to take away my child's innocence by talking about something like this. And I say, okay, so that to me is an ultimate racial, not ultimate, but a high level of racial privilege, because children whose families are of color have talked about race since they were in utero.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I think when we don't talk about these things, we are adding to the division. And we also put our stuff on it, like little kids. I had a teacher come to me one day and she said, so one of the children in my class, kindergarten class, said to another child, but you're not Black. And the child said, but yes, I am. And she was like, no, I'm not. And the teacher's response was, okay, we're all different. And she shut down the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be in the building, and I said, so do you mind if I just listen to that conversation? Could we replay that and listen to it? We're talking about replaying things in class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I was like, so what do you mean when you say to somebody that they're not Black? And she said, well, because Black is Black and his skin's more brown. So then I said to the other child who was saying I am Black, I said, so what do you mean when you say that you're Black? And he was like, because that's the word that everyone in my family uses to describe ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to say to two kids, yes, true, his skin looks more brown than Black, but the word that he uses to identify himself is Black. And it's a really important word for him. You know what I mean? Like we need to listen to what they're actually saying and what they're actually thinking and asking, and not put our own stuff on them.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, I bumped up against that with my 4-year-old daughter not too long ago, because she's 4 and she wants to marry the boy at her day home.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. But, well, we have to tell her, well, no, he doesn't want to marry her. He wants to have nothing to do with her. So, good for him. So she was like, well, then maybe I can marry my friend, this girl at my preschool. And I didn't know how to react.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I mean, should I say, well, no, you can't do that. Right? I didn't say that. And my wife and I were both looking at each other like, well, what do we say now? We kind of got lost in this morass of well, what's the conversation when it comes to a 4-year-old,
Well, so to me, the conversation there is a little different. She's expressing deep love and a desire to know that she will remain connected to her friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
And so then it's not so much about who you marry, it's more about, well, why is that? Well, I want to marry her because I want to know she'll be my friend forever. Okay, great. Let's work on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's so often our stuff and not theirs. And I'll give you an example in my house.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest child is a freshman in college. But I helped raise my cousin who's 34. And when my oldest child was 6, I think, my cousin came out as being transgender. Mm-hmm. And this was before the word was used commonly in society. And so I just thought, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? And my husband's looking at me, he's like, look, you're the therapist, educator, and diversity person. Like, if you don't know, then what? And I went back to my favorite strategy that I say all the time when we're challenged by a topic, is to use one sentence, a real sentence, and then stop and listen. Because when we're anxious, we fill space with words or anxiety.
Uh-huh.
And so simply, one of the strategies is to just say, well, tell me more about that. And then you hear more of what your kid's talking about. But so in this case, I thought, oh, okay. So I said to my then 6-year-old, you know how you've said he's more like your brother than your sister? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so he's decided that he's going to be more like your brother than your sister, more of your brother than your sister. Mm. And my son was like, okay. And so I went through all this stuff, and his thing was like, okay, can I watch SpongeBob?
Yeah.
And then the key was I needed to just end it with, and if you have more, as we go through the next couple of years, if you have more questions about that, we can talk about it. But I need to answer in one sentence. So I think, like, I know that anxiety that I want to say the right thing. Am I gonna change things? Am I gonna do it wrong? And the beautiful thing is if we do it wrong, and I'm using air quotes here,
Yeah.
We have a fantastic opportunity to model one of the best things our kids can see. I made a mistake. I've thought about it. I wish I had done it differently. I'd like to tell you what I've been thinking about now. Any of those kind of sentence stems model for our kids that important things require thought. Learned people can wish they'd done things differently. Deepening understanding can happen with time. I mean, these are great things for our kids to learn. We teach them in school and as parents, and so we need to model them too.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that strikes me too about the one sentence thing, I mean, all the examples you gave are about drawing people in. Like it comes back to inviting people into the room.
Yeah.
Giving voice to people who are, encountering difficult situations, whether, in the case of a 6-year-old, whether they realize it or not, it's could be a challenging situation. I guess, SpongeBob is calling. So sure. Okay, Mom, fine. Got it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of those things, when we think of 6-year-olds or 4-year-olds, I mean, that's just such a powerful time. Mm-hmm. And yet they have very little sense of power at the same time. So, it's when we are putting our own stuff on it. Here's a classic example that some of the 4-year-old kids that I work with have, shared with me many times over the years. My youngest students are 3, and my oldest are in college, other than adults. Is that they'll say something like, if they're mad at a friend and they know they can't hit them or something, which, that's what the desire is, but they know they can't, and they're mad, then they might say, well, then fine, you can't come to my birthday party, even though their birthday party is 6 months from then. Yeah. Well, that's because their brains don't understand time and they're trying to have power. And so what adults frequently say is, oh, that's not nice. Or, oh, don't worry, you weren't invited to the birthday party at 6 months from now. No big deal. Instead of, wow, that's a pretty powerful thing to say. You must have some big feelings there. What's going on? It's a very different conversation, right? So,
yeah.
And these are all the precursors for those bigger conversations around equity.
Mm-hmm. I think from what I can tell from what you're telling me is it really kind of boils down to voice.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I mean, we talk about the importance of teacher, student voice and choice. But how do you, as a teacher, I mean, how can you help your students? I mean, because sometimes students they want to know that the place that they're in is safe. I mean, how do you help a student know that you're safe without, ham-fistedly coming in and saying, it's okay to talk about, minorities and diversity and gender, and like, how do you do that without sounding like an idiot and seeming disingenuous?
Well, there are 2 strategies that I mean, 25 years I've been using these same strategies because I have limited material, but also they've been really successful. And one is, it comes from GLSEN, which is the Gay Lesbian Sexual Educators Network from way back in the day, of putting something up on your wall or on your board or wherever it is you're posting things that says, this is a safe place to talk about. And then start writing up words. And you can write up a couple now and have kids put them up and then ask, is this a safe place for us to talk about these things? You can even take a little couple of minutes of each class, what's another thing we'd like to have up here? Or if a child brings in a topic that's really challenging and you don't have time to discuss it, using the previous script of, I want to think about that, but put that up on the board is something that just lets kids know, and making it a living, breathing thing. Now you're having a partnered conversation, but also I think it's important to tell kids something along the lines of, here's what I say to kids all the time. I have no idea what it's like to be your age today. And no matter what experiences I've had, I will never understand what it's like to be you today. And so if there are things that are going on with you that you feel I don't get or that other adults don't get, you're probably right. And that doesn't mean that I don't want to listen to you and I don't care about you and I don't respect you and I don't want to grow and learn more. So it's a both and. And I have found that to be, first of all, it helps me so that when I, show that I don't know something, kids will say, hey, yeah, that just showed you didn't get it. But also it messages to kids that adults, we don't need to live with our adultism, and we don't need to wield it around, but also kids deserve to have adults say to them, this is a safe place, it's a secure place, but I have no idea what it's like to be you, and I'm still here and I'm still listening.
And that's a great way to keep the conversation open. I mean, that's something what you're sharing with me now is something I've learned, I'm going to say, in the last couple of months, really. And it's been so empowering as a teacher to be able to just have that approach. Like, it's okay to tell someone that, I don't know what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what that feels like, but I'm here to listen.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Anytime you've had a hard time, if you go and you tell a bunch of your friends and they all start telling you how they've had similar experiences.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
So it also, by the way, as a parent of multiple kids, it's a great get out of parenting tough moment strategy, because I can say to my kids, even though I've raised another one of you, I've never raised you at this age. And so there are going to be times when I show that I just don't get it. And how can you tell me that in a respectful way, but also lets me know that you need to be heard? Nice. It's a lot of that both and. I use both and a lot.
Both and.
Yeah, both and. It's both this is happening and we need something else, instead of either, do I get it or do I not? No, I don't get it and I'm still here.
Right. Well, it's kind of, I teach a lot of improv. So it's the golden rule is always yes and never say no. But so it kind of, is running along the same lines. And I like that you're not blocking the conversation, right? We teach that in improv, never block the scene, never make it stop. So,
I love that.
So you always do it by accepting and saying yes, right? And then adding something to it. So in this case, what you're saying though is just say, even if I don't get it, I still want to know. I want to know more. Yeah. That's
so
beautiful.
It sounds like your improv skills that you teach the students, if faculty could learn some of those improv skills, they would help them immensely in these kinds of situations.
Sweet. And we're going to have one heck of a staff meeting next month then. Awesome.
There you go. Use what you have. That's what I always say, is whatever strategies you're using to teach them everything else and to learn with them for everything else, use them for this stuff too.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, Jen, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have been on with you. And I was excited to have seen your podcast in the feed, and will be excited to be listening to your episodes, because I think we have a similar approach of let's just have real conversations, and we educators need to be able to kind of overhear those real conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have listened to your show and it's like, that's my show. It's the same show.
Oh,
we have the same show.
I'm so glad.
Oh.
Well, then I'm really glad that we've connected in this space so we can support each other. Because I think, the more we can help teachers to have those opportunities to just eavesdrop and have the ability to just learn, that's such a great thing. I wish I had that when I was an administrator.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish I'd had this for a long time too. So it took me like 3 years of podcasting to figure out what the heck I was actually doing. And I was like, oh, that's what this is. Okay. So, but yeah, very valuable. So if people want to listen to your podcast or, in other ways, sort of learn from Jen Cort, where can they go?
So my podcast is called Third Space with Jen Cort. And I just learned I have to add the third with Jen Cort, because apparently there's a third spaces. And then my email or my website has kind of everything, and it's jencort.com. But the spelling for Cort is CORT. And obviously all social media, I'm on all social media.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you again. This has been a really good conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care and have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Take
All
care.
right. Yeah, you too. Yeah,
Bye.
bye-bye. All right, and if you want to get in touch or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you'd like to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podbean.com, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcatcher of your choice. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. You can find this and all other member podcasts at albertapodcastnetwork.com. While you're there, check out the Tight Ends podcast. I had the pleasure of being a guest on the show just a few weeks back, and it is a podcast all about sports for people who maybe don't have sports as the center of their life. Check it out at tightendspodcast.com. Ed, of course, can also be heard on VoiceHead Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself, Jen, thanks very much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.